Coming up on this episode, is the Warriors training camp roster finally complete after a controversial decision yesterday, followed by the signing of a former top 10 pick today? Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you're all having a great week. It feels like over the past few days, I've been going back and forward trying to work out what the Warriors are doing with their training camp roster. There's been so much activity in terms of signing guys to Exhibit 10 contracts, waiving guys on Exhibit 10 contracts, all this different kind of stuff. But it now feels just less than a week out from training camp that this roster is probably pretty much set in stone. And I say probably and pretty much fairly loosely there because who knows? Who knows? It seems like Mike Dunleavy Jr. has wanted to take us on a bit of a ride here over the past 10 days or so with all the transactions that have been going on. But let's get into what's happened over the past 24 hours because I think of all the stuff that's happened in the past 10 days, this is certainly the most important and what's going to have the most impact on how we see the final shape of the Warriors roster ahead of their season opener against the Portland Trail Blazers on October 23. So, going in chronological order back to yesterday, very, very controversial decision from the Warriors to waive Daeqwon Plowden. Now, we knew for months, essentially, that there was going to be some movement on the two-way contracts with Quinten Post expected to get a two-way contract, but taking until yesterday for that to be confirmed. So we always knew the one of Plowden, Pat Spencer, or Reece Beekman were likely to be a casualty in terms of being able to bring Post onto the roster. I think most, including myself, would have considered that Plowden was the least likely to make way for Post in terms of being on the two-way roster. On a two-way contract. I think he was the most set in stone, just given the way he performed in Summer League, the urgency in which I think the Warriors acted to ensure that he remained with the franchise. I think there was a sense during Summer League, he was really a Summer League standout, not just for the Warriors, but across the entire league. And I think there was an urgency from the Warriors of saying, hey, if we don't secure this guy right away on some kind of contract, then there's a real chance that someone else is going to come in, see these Summer League performances and nab him from us straight away. So I think it felt to me, again, just from the outside, that there was an urgency there to get this guy on a two-way contract. And maybe there was, and now since then they've kind of reconsidered it a bit more and clearly seen him as the guy who is most affordable to let go. But it is really perplexing for the fan base. A lot of the reactions yesterday, all you have to do is go on the Warriors PR Twitter page, see their official statement on waiving Daeqwon Plowden, see all the replies of people literally just responding with why and thinking that the Warriors have made a mistake here in waiving Daeqwon Plowden. The only thing that I can think of out of all of this is that it's really come down to a positional need, really, on the entire roster. And I've spoken about all offseason about the Warriors' lack of point guard depth beyond Steph Curry and Brandon Podziemski, the latter of which doesn't even have any experience playing the point guard position in the NBA. Of course, Kyle Anderson, Draymond Green, they're going to have their fair share of ball handling and playmaking duties. But again, beyond Steph and Pods, who is it? And it's really only Spencer and Beekman, and maybe that's why those two guys have been retained over Daeqwon Plowden, who is a 6'6" wing. So many options for the Warriors at the 2-3 position. At the end of the day, this is, yes, fans are going to be frustrated by it. And I think a lot of fans saw Plowden play in Summer League and thought, hey, this is a guy that could be a rotation player for the Warriors this upcoming season in the NBA. But I think at the end of the day, it's not going to be life or death. It's clearly not going to be the difference between the Warriors winning a championship or not this season. Now, can Plowden, make the Warriors come to regret this decision? Possibly. The other thing I should mention is there is still an opportunity here for him to win back that two-way spot. So it sounds like the Warriors want to bring him to training camp. Of course, he can now go out and see, his agent can now go out and see if there's another opportunity elsewhere for him, whether it's on a two-way contract, which, I mean, he's not going to get a main roster spot with anyone at this point, but a two-way contract elsewhere, which is obviously far more secure than just getting an Exhibit 10 contract and then having to fight your way to regain that two-way spot. So there's still a chance for him to do that if he does ultimately sign an Exhibit 10 with the Warriors, comes to training camp, plays in preseason. Perhaps he can win that spot over Reece Beekman or Pat Spencer, but it would be considered unlikely at this stage. In fact, there's probably a good chance that he joins another team and tries to make an opportunity somewhere else. I'm surprised because I thought it was going to be Beekman. I just for the last few weeks, couple of months, just thought, yeah, Beekman's the obvious one because I can actually see the value in Spencer as kind of this third string point guard. He's 28 years old, right? Yes, he's on a two-way contract, but he's old. He doesn't have any NBA experience really, but he obviously has been around playing. He's got a lot of college experience, obviously former lacrosse player, has been around the Warriors system for a while now. So I see the value in Spencer. I just don't think you need 2 point guards on two-way contracts. And we've always spoken about the Warriors and their infatuation with guards. And that seems to have continued and extends into this two-way contract situation where they want to take 2 point guards rather than a 6'6" guy. So it is disappointing, I think, to a degree. But again, it's not going to be the difference between whether the Warriors win a championship or not. And I think Daeqwon Plowden still has a long way to go, a very uphill battle to try and make the Warriors regret letting him go if that is ultimately what happens and he doesn't come to training camp or doesn't win his two-way spot back from Beekman or Spencer. So very, very interesting, very controversial, albeit we're talking about a two-way contract. And again, the overall impact that necessarily has on a roster and on the Warriors next season is going to be fairly limited. What it shouldn't do is take away from the excitement of Quinten Post, who we have been waiting months for, fans have been waiting months for, to see what the Warriors were going to do. Of course, it's long been reported that he would get this two-way contract, but of course, until that actually happens, then we didn't know what was going to happen, and it's kind of surprising that it took until less than a week before training camp for that to come to fruition. I don't know why they couldn't do this a few weeks ago. Maybe it's a case of like they were literally having their own pre-training camp battle between like Plowden, Spencer, and Beekman, and that's what was going on to determine who could, who should stay and who should be the one to go to make way for Quinten Post. Maybe that was the case, and I can envisage that having happened. I'm sure we'll get more answers to these type of questions on Media Day. But the excitement around Quinten Post is certainly there, and much more so in a way that you'd usually expect from a 52nd overall pick, right? Usually these guys, you think, well, first of all, a lot of guys in the 50s, go overseas and like draft and stash guys like Gui Santos was for the Warriors. But otherwise, a lot of guys are like, in the 50s, you think that they're going to be spending a fair chunk of time in the G League developing, which is certainly could be the case for Quinten Post. There's no doubt about that. But he is 24 years old. He's got that plethora of college experience, and he's just a completely unique prospect on this Golden State roster. And I think that's why there's so much intrigue, so much fascination in him, his potential, what he could become, because it's completely different to whatever else the Warriors have on their roster. And it's actually like, even thinking about it further than that, it's more like it's unique to anything the Warriors have really had for quite some years. Like, this is an offensive-minded center. And the Warriors, the system that they play, where clearly they play from the guard positions, from the wings, Steph, Clay, KD during the prime years, whatever else, they've always had that, Draymond, first and foremost, is a defensive-minded guy at the 4 position, but then at the 5, they've also had a defensive-minded guy, whether it be going back to Andrew Bogut, now Looney, Festus Ezeli, JaVale McGee, Zaza Pachulia, like whatever else, all these guys, they're usually defensive-minded guys who their main asset offensively is probably passing the ball more than anything, and screen setting as well and getting those other guys open. So it's going to be interesting now to have a guy who can actually be a play finisher, who can obviously, like he showed in college, he can shoot the shit out of the ball, 43.1% with Boston College last season. He also showed that he can get to the basket a little bit. Nice couple of plays in Summer League where he kind of pump faked on the three and drove to the basket. So, super fascinating player for the Warriors. Doesn't mean it's going to work out. Doesn't mean he's going to be a rotation player this season or at any point in his career. But I think just to kind of demonstrate the interest in this guy, Steve Kerr had a quote in a recent interview with Tim Kawakami where he was talking about Jonathan Kuminga, and of course a lot of talk this offseason about whether Jonathan Kuminga can play at the small forward spot for the Warriors this season. Steve, in response to that, said, he's definitely a small forward if we've got a shooting five out on the floor, right? Okay, so if that's the case, and Kuminga can only be a small forward with a shooting five out there, then doesn't that mean that the only way Kuminga can play at the three is if Post is also on the court? Because there is no other shooting five on the Warriors roster. Unless, are we claiming that Draymond's a shooting five? I'm not even sure he's a five. Like, he's a four. He's a power forward. Might start at the five for the Warriors this season. Doesn't mean he's necessarily a five. And do we call Draymond a shooting five? Because, yes, he does shoot the ball more than other non-shooting big men. But teams don't necessarily guard him. And therefore, are we calling him a shooting five? I don't think we necessarily are. So if that's the case, and I mean, Loon has said he wants to shoot threes this season. We'll wait and see. We got to see it first before we believe in that. TJD maybe doing the same thing. Haven't heard too much about that, but possibly it'd be nice if he brought that to his game. But really, right now, Post is the only genuine shooting five on the roster. And so this essentially means, if Steve's saying that just goes to show you the level in which Post could impact the Warriors. Because having that shooting five could unlock so many different lineups for Steve Kerr. And it's why, going back into the offseason, I had some interest in Brook Lopez, who I'm not saying Quinten Post is ever going to be Brook Lopez, but that's the kind of similar-ish player. Has limitations athletically and mobility-wise, but very, very skilled offensive player. And he's obviously big enough. He'll block shots. He blocked shots in college. He'll do some stuff around the rim just because he's so big. Reasonable IQ, reasonable feel for the game. So that's kind of the player that you'd like Post to be molded into. And I would have interest in Brook Lopez if he was available on the trade market, because again, that's the kind of player that completely unlocks the Warriors and what they could possibly do with different combinations. Again, Lauri Markkanen would have been perfect. Lauri Markkanen, 7-footer, elite and top end, best big man shooter in the league kind of levels. I mean, you could say Cat, whatever else, but Lauri Markkanen, unbelievably good shooter, unbelievably good offensive player. That was the dream, obviously. But outside of that, is there someone else in the trade market you could go and try and get, like a Brook Lopez or someone else? And then Post, that's ultimately who you want. If that guy can develop into being that type of player, then that would be unbelievable for the Warriors. And it's why fans are so intrigued in his potential, because of not only him individually, but how it could impact the entire team. Other young guys like Kuminga, TJD as well. He's obviously, they're not going to share the floor together necessarily, but if you've got that blend of defense that TJD and Loon bring, and then you've got that offensive punch as well with Post, this is what, the versatility the Warriors need to add from the center position, because they clearly need to play in a different way than what they did during the dynasty years. There's no Klay Thompson anymore. They cannot play in a way that is, what has delivered for them in the past. They need to change things up. And much of that has to do with their offense. And they're changing that a bit in terms of the athleticism and the ability to get to the rim. In terms of Kuminga breaking the record for most dunks in a single season in franchise history last year. TJD had an unbelievable dunk rate. I think he had a dunk every 11 minutes last season, which if he does that again, extends his minutes out, he'll break the record from JK for most dunks in a season. So in terms of the ability to get to the rim and the athletic stuff, the Warriors are changing things up there. But Quinten Post, again, would bring a whole new element that the Warriors don't currently have. So super excited to see him. And, Dalton Johnson of NBC Sports Bay Area, I think he reported yesterday, one source within the franchise, quoted Post as an exciting developmental guy, and that the Warriors have been impressed by him over the offseason heading into training camp, which again only gives you further encouragement to see what Quinten Post can do in training camp and across these 6 preseason games. All right, moving on to today's news. Kevin Knox II, I kind of have mentioned this on the last couple of episodes in terms of guys the Warriors could potentially bring to training camp, and Kevin Knox being a lead candidate. That has officially become the case. He has signed an Exhibit 10 contract with the Warriors. So 1-year deal, but of course can be waived after the preseason. The final game is October 18 against the Lakers. So you'd imagine a decision would come very, very shortly after that. So he will now fight. There will be a training camp battle for 2 spots effectively on the Warriors roster between Gui Santos, Lindy Waters III, and Kevin Knox II. I would find it difficult to see Kevin, I think Knox is still a fair way back. He's going to have to make up some ground. If this was, a 400-meter race, I think the other guys are starting at the 300, right? And they've got 300 to go, and he's got 400. He's starting a fair way back. But that doesn't mean he can't do it. And he's evidently got the talent and the tools to do so. This is a 9th overall pick. I don't want to get into Kevin Knox too much because I spoke about him extensively on last episode and his possible candidacy for this training camp spot. But I think it is important to, I like the move. And I think it's important to note that the Warriors, yes, they're taking a bit of a risk here with a guy who's been a very big disappointment, you would say, particularly after his first year in the league with the Knicks was actually quite good. But since then, it's been disappointing. And the Warriors are taking a risk here, but there's very little downside. If it doesn't work out, you waive him after preseason, say, see you later, thanks, but no thanks, and that's it. But again, as I said on last episode, maybe there's a world here in which a new environment, a winning environment, if you didn't hear that stat I said on last episode, Kevin Knox has a career win-loss winning percentage of 31.4. He's just never been at a winning organization. Knicks, trash when he arrived. Trailblazers, very average. Pistons, worst team in the last 5 years. 17-game stint at Atlanta, doesn't even count. Never been at a competent organization, effectively. Right? The Knicks are competent now. They're fantastic, but they weren't when they drafted him. Right? Horrific. So I just wonder if being at the Warriors can unearth things for him a little bit. And something that I didn't mention on last episode that I do want to mention now is that I'm encouraged by the fact that not only did he go to Summer League and play for the Warriors, I think that's a big step. That's a big step for a former top 10 pick to say, you know what, I'm 6 years into my career, but I'm still fighting for a spot here. And so, you know what? I'm going to go to Summer League, which is really for guys, first, second, maybe third, maybe fourth year guys, other guys that haven't been in the league at all who are fighting for a position. That's what Summer League is for. But you know what? I'm 6 years in, former top 10 pick. I'm going to have a crack. Not only did he have a crack, he willingly, I'm not sure it was willing, but he accepted and played well in a bench role. He came off the bench in every game for the Warriors, played well, had 30 points, 11 rebounds, 12 of 17 shooting in that semi-final against the Heat. I was just encouraged by the attitude, more than anything, of a guy that talented, taken that high in the draft, that deep into his career, saying, yeah, you know what? I'm going to Summer League. This is the best chance for me to try and impress and get another spot somewhere. And I think he took that with both hands. Now, it wasn't all great. The shooting percentages were okay, but not off the charts by any means. The shooting percentages across his career aren't great. 39% from the floor, 34% from three-point range. But I don't know. I see the tools. Like, he's 6'7", good size, can shoot the ball, can get to the rim, can dribble a little bit. There's the tools there for something still, right? And I'm just interested to see whether or not, again, the Warriors environment can kind of unlock something that hasn't previously been unlocked at franchises that were not into winning, essentially. Not only were they not good at it, but they were actively not trying to win and not trying to play in a way that was conducive to that. So good luck to Kevin Knox. If I had to guess, I'd be surprised if we get to the start of the season and Kevin Knox is on the 14-man main roster over Lindy Waters or Gui Santos. Now, of course, the Warriors can make another trade, open up the financial flexibility for a 15th guy, and wow, okay, there's Kevin Knox. Again, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's more so the training camp battle, non-guaranteed contracts of Santos and Waters. Two out of the three, right? And one of them will go. Knox, again, behind the eight ball, but with the talent and the tools to perhaps make something happen. And this is 6 preseason games, right? That's actually a fair sample size here for the Warriors to kind of manage their veteran players and, main starting guys. So they play a few games here and there, a couple of games where they play a half. There is going to be opportunity for guys at the end of the roster, like Knox, like Waters, like Santos, like the guys on two-way contracts. We're going to see Quinten Post. I'm sure he'll get his fair share of time in preseason. So this is kind of an extended preseason in terms of the amount of games. Usually it's 4 or 5. And so Kevin Knox will have his opportunity. He will have his opportunity. And I'm excited to see it. And again, a lot of people will think, oh, well, this is 13th, 14th spots on the roster. Who really cares? Well, yeah, that's usually probably the case. But we only have to go back 3 years. Gary Payton II, Avery Bradley, now famous training camp battle where a lot of the players, veteran players, Steph, Draymond, wanted Avery Bradley. Front office went the other way, picked GP2. 6-7 months later, he's top 8, 9 in a rotation on a championship team, right? When that was the last spot, the 15th roster spot. And so you just don't know what can happen when, yes, you're talking about the final spots on the roster, but how that could potentially materialize into something far greater 6-7 months down the track. And of course, GP2 is still on the roster. He had that time in Portland briefly, which I'm sure none of us will like. He probably doesn't want to talk about, but he's on the roster still entering this season. So that just goes to show you what these kind of training camp battles, how much of an impact they can have. I'm sure, I legitimately think if the Warriors went with Avery Bradley right now, if the Warriors went with Avery Bradley 3 years ago in 2021 training camp, I don't think Gary Payton II would be in the NBA this second. I don't think he would be. He certainly wouldn't be an NBA champion. He certainly wouldn't have got the 3-year, was it $27 million contract he got from the Blazers in free agency. So that just goes to show you the impact that these training camp battles can have. And Kevin Knox is still young enough. He's 25 years old. We'll wait and see. Let me know what you think. Do you think that Kevin Knox can overtake Santos or Lindy Waters in training camp? What would you have done with the two-way contract situation? Is there still a possibility for Plowden to come back? Would you have preferred to get rid of Beekman or Spencer? Let me know in the YouTube comments below, or if you've got anything else in the way of Warriors opinion commentary that you'd like to share ahead of training camp. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. And other than that, guys, I'll see you on the next episode.